Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. Welcome. Nice to see you all. We're seeing lots of names pop into our participant list. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to get started in just a moment. Happy to have you all here this morning. I hope you're enjoying this nice summer day and that it's beautiful where you are. Although I guess if you're in New York, it's not. So be careful, New Yorkers and others who are suffering from the air quality out of those Canadian fires. Thank you for joining us indoors. All right. We have just a little bit of time together here this morning, and we want to make the absolute most of it. So others may join us as we go through this, but we're going to get started for those of you who joined us right on time. Let's get underway. Welcome. I'm Betsy Henning, and I am the global practice leader for Finn Partners Employee Engagement Practice, which means I get to work with companies of all sorts of different industries, at different sizes, different geographies, and help them navigate the challenging times that we are in today, with really the rewriting of nearly every part of the employer and employee relationship and agreement. I'm delighted to be here this morning to talk with you about mental health matters. We're just outside the boundaries of Mental Health Month, but of course we all know that the challenges don't fit inside a 31-day window in May. And we've got some really exciting things to talk about here. I got a lot of comments from folks leading into this about the notion of the word emotional innovation, and that seemed to pique interest among many people. The notion of attaching innovation to emotions and to mental health and to the workplace and employee engagement. And that's really a definition of the time we're in. So we're excited to get into it. Let's not waste another minute. I want to introduce my wonderful colleague, Barry Reicherter, who is going to join me in talking about this issue. Barry, introduce yourself.
Hi, welcome. Good afternoon. This is Barry Reicherter. I'm the lead of the intelligence chief for Finn Partners. I run our global intelligence team. We work mainly in research and analytics and analysis of many issues, including this one, mental health. We've been tracking that for quite a while and have done several studies on that. And we're seeing what kind of impact that there is in the workplace. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, Barry, on this topic. So as we, one piece of housekeeping before we get started, and that is, we hope you've brought some questions. There are certainly a lot of questions out there about this and other topics related to employee engagement. We will try and get to as many of them as we can in our short time together. Please feel free to put those questions at any time into the Q&A section on the bottom menu bar of the webinar window. And we'll get to them at the end of our presentation. So we'll look forward to answering whatever questions you have. Just pop them in there and we'll get to them. Okay, transitioning now into the real topic at hand. Mental health challenges are absolutely clear, and what has been a new reframing of mental health, which is going on all over the place. The notion about how do we destigmatize mental health. Never has it been more important to talk about it as an issue in the workplace. It has huge impacts on work. And that's because whether work is the cause of stress or not that is causing mental health issues, your employees bring all of it to work. So some of it may be entirely outside the realm of the business operations, environment, relationships, and yet every last bit of it comes into the workplace and affects people's ability to focus, to produce, to innovate, and to get the work done. So it is incumbent upon companies to be thinking differently about engagement with employees, about the resources and the processes that they have available to employees as we deal with these mental health challenges. And the real issue here is that there are no models. Prior to 2020, there were very few companies that were doing anything noteworthy or material about mental health management or dealing with mental health issues at work. It was a little bit of something that was swept aside, disregarded, and not seen as a central core responsibility of the employer to deal with employee mental health. And that's not true anymore. So this is why this notion of innovation is so important here, is while it's typically associated with technology or products, innovation today is really being driven into thinking, approaches, philosophies around how we are building and managing the employee engagement systems at companies small and large across the world. And it's the key to success in every organization. How you feel when you are at work has everything to do with the quality and the impact of the work you create. So solutions aren't easy. Every company is different, but the effort will have positive impact. Barry's been working on some research that will help illuminate this. And over the course of the next few minutes, we're going to go through 3 key research points and talk about 3 key solutions that you can be thinking about as an employer that can help drive better results for your organization. Barry, I'm handing it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. And that point that you made earlier is really salient, because one of the first data points that we found in our study that we did last year to employees, both at from an entry level, mid-management level, all the way to senior leadership level, was exactly related to that notion, that you can't separate people from their personal lives and the stresses that they bring into the business. But what we saw in this post-pandemic period is that it also goes the other way, that the job itself creates stress and anxiety for that person, for that employee, that carries into their personal life too. So these lines are blurred, and really pressure can come from both sides. And when we looked at it, what were the top things that they were doing? Of course, we expected those things that are always there when it comes to personal stress: money, finances, top out the pop of it, but work was in there too, in the top 3. And we say here, obviously 29%, nearly 30%, close to a third, feel that the work environment and that team culture was driving some of their stress, in addition to all those other big things that happen in their life. So really, you've got where work can play a culprit in this, overall stress and anxiety of that particular employee, which is definitely going to impact the things that you talked about: productivity, alignment, all these different things that are important to have a very productive, happy, and healthy employee base. And that, and so those things are definitely a factor to what you were just talking about.
Thanks, Barry. This is just huge research, and it really demonstrates, because of course your job and your finances have a relationship as well. So it's almost like that 29% gets a booster shot when you add the financial picture into it, particularly in a time of inflation and real concerns about how we're going to make all the ends meet. So let's talk for a minute about this issue and what companies can do about it that can help employees deal with the stress that they're experiencing, and get back to the work that will help ameliorate both the stress and help the business be more successful. So what we've found, Barry, is that we're going to suggest that companies do something that probably isn't on their radar currently, and may not even feel like this is a direct hit against the issue. And that is, let's work with those managers, particularly middle managers, because the middle manager plays a very distinct and special role in the employee's experience with the company. And they are the best situated to help empower the employee to take steps to address the mental health issues that they're experiencing, and for the employee to share and reveal some of the concerns that they have, so that that manager can be an effective resource, buddy, partner in helping the situation. And And that's because, of course, employees can't focus on the work that they're supposed to do if they're overly stressed. Managers are also the first person to see that and experience that. And so this is really an overlooked cohort for training and investment. And that's the key takeaway that we would want to share with employers. And some of you out here in our webinar are managers yourself. You may be middle managers, you may be senior and executive managers. And it's really all the same because you are feeling pressure. Those middle managers, which were, of course, for many, many decades, just the heart and soul of large companies. In the late 80s and the 90s, we really stripped out a lot of that managerial layer and turned those folks into working managers. And they got cultivated and trained to do something different than be a high empathy leader. And so we need to reinstitute some of those old practices and behaviors for our managers to be their most effective. And that's a tough position. Those middle managers are probably in one of the toughest positions in your company. They feel pressure from above and from below. They aren't part of the executive ranks, and yet they also aren't part of the individual contributor crowd either. And so they're often newly in these manager roles, and relationships are shifting, and they don't quite have the security and standing. They're looking for new ways of being for themselves, and then so they're under a great deal of stress themselves, and they're dealing with their employee and their teams who are super stressed out too. So this is an area where training managers and investing in them to help them build skills in balance and empathy, where they can lead employees on the critical business issues, but also be good resources and empathetic listeners, helping their employees find things could really make a difference.
And let me tell you where the data supports that. Our next data point here that we have is really starts to clearly identify that pivotal role that these middle managers will have. When you look at overall, nearly a third of employees say that work-life balance is out of balance. So it's out of whack. They're not feeling those blurred lines between work and home and what they're doing. Remote has something to do with it as well, although it's also a benefit. That is attributing across a board. But here's where the middle managers come in a little bit more. 58% of those younger employees are the ones that feel that the most. So really, it's that middle management layer that is starting to, there's a group of employees that this is disproportionately happening. And most of your younger employers are going to be mostly on the junior side, typically. And so those middle managers are extremely important to this, because now you've got one sector of your audience that is starting to show that it has a greater need, and they need to be able to identify that and know how to deal with those kinds of things. So that's a great point, Betsy.
Well, and that brings back to mind this notion of innovation, because this is the world in which ambiguity is ruling currently. There are no known models. There's no pat template for work-life balance, for return to work, for how to manage hybrid. And those managers are once again really put in the hot seat of pressure from below, pressure from their teams about flexibility, about location flexibility, hours flexibility, about really wanting and needing job clarity, so they know what success looks like and they know how to achieve it, because they want the flexibility to be able to do it on their own time. And then pressure from above to often bring people back to work, to refill those offices. And so again, it's one of those pressure points. But what we're going to say about this notion of work-life balance and workplace flexibility is that I think the one thing that we're really learning in this time of exploration and experimentation is that there is not a one-size-fits-all. And so our advice to companies is generally to look at your populations not as one great big whole, but in segments. And those segments might be by job classification. We have two clients, for instance, engineering-based clients. One really is an agile focused workplace, and they are requiring their engineering teams to be in office a lot more because that agile process, it was really benefits from in-person work styles. The other one, an engineering company, has a more traditional workflow, and they do just fine with distance and hybrid, mostly work from home. And so we really want to encourage our companies to think about these as what's important to getting the work done. How is the team functioning now? How can we be more clear about the job function and the job outcomes? Because all of that's going to drive to a better answer about how to manage the tension between work-life balance, home versus office, etc. This is a very tricky area. There aren't any real answers. I wish there were. I wish I could say there were. That's a webinar for the future. And companies really don't have it figured out. In fact, I'll leave you this last stat, and then we can move on to the next, our third point, which is that there was a survey recently done about hybrid work and how's it working. And these are executives answering the question. And 98% of the people who answered said, we don't have it figured out yet. We're still experimenting. So you're in good company. That's what I'm telling you, is you're in good company if you're feeling like you don't have it figured out. I don't think anybody does yet. I don't think we will, honestly. I've been known to say for a generation, so don't be scared by that. We're going to be in this one for a while.
Yeah, one of the things that's going to make this a bigger challenge is our next data point, which is there's a big disconnect going on right now between leadership and work and overall employees. As we can see here, nearly half of the employees believe that the culture at their place of employment fosters a high stress environment. But when we asked senior leaders that question, only 21% of them thought that was an issue. So getting these middle managers better trained, more programs to help them deal with things like that is going to take a little bit of an awakening of the senior leadership to understand that that's an issue. They're a little bit disconnected. So again, that middle manager role plays a pivotal part in communicating that back up to leadership so that they can have the infrastructure and programs in place to be able to help with that. And those are kind of big things with that. One of the questions that got posted here by Alicia is, we can see that, how recent is this data? And, we did this study in the fall of last year, but, there's a new study that we just did working with the American Psychiatric Association Foundation and a new campaign called Mental Healthcare Works, is where we do have recent numbers within the past month that shows that this has not, the demand of this from employees hasn't gone away. We did a nationwide survey, where we asked, what did they expect? What kind of role do they expect employers to play in overall mental health? And we were able to kind of pull away that, of the three entities that people felt had a responsibility, employers had the responsibility to help identify those issues, destigmatize them so that employees felt uncomfortable going forward, and more importantly, training about how to do these things. So those were the areas where they felt this is where somebody's spending most of their day at the workplace, that they had a pivotal role. Employers had a pivotal role in being able to provide these different things. So again, that kind of reinforces the strength of having that program that you were just talking about, Betsy, being able to prepare these middle managers and the culture in general to be able to help employees is incredibly important.
Yeah, this is a tricky and rich area. I see another question there. It says, so are younger employers just soft? And that really opens up my comments on this last data point, which is the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. They are different. And so the job here is to open up dialogue and channels of understanding so that the longstanding executives and leaders of the company can see and hear and understand new ways of thinking and doing and being that will help them, one, appreciate a difference, but also appreciate the opportunity of that difference. And so, the cornerstone of an empowered workplace is one that has empathy, human-centered, where we are connected and positive about our differences. And the upheavals of the pandemic and the social unrest that we've had over the last 3 years have really rewritten the rules for the employer and employee relationship. And the young people, and it's not just young people, I really want to, I resist that characterization, because it really isn't just young people. It is women, it is people of color, it is introverts, it is a whole bunch of people who understand that and have experienced that a different way of working is actually a better way of working for them. And that the trade-offs that are traditionally often characterized as, well, what about how will they learn from executives if they aren't in the same buildings and rooms with them? How will they build the relationships that will empower their careers? And, those are conventional wisdom kinds of things about returning to the office. And I think there are different ways of doing things in the future than we have done them in the past, and they are very likely better. In fact, I would bet my bottom dollar they're better. We're still in the place of experimenting, and so we have to be open and learning. And so if I were coaching executives in my company and helping executives come to terms with this, I would really be focused on those kinds of activities that help them see and appreciate differences, and new ways of thinking about their long-held beliefs. And mental health is a really key part of this. I mean, the thing that often goes unsaid in these conversations is those key executives are also under tremendous pressure and stress, and they have their own mental health challenges. We've seen studies that say that 71% or more of executives feel like they are at risk for their mental health because of their jobs, because their whole world has changed too. So this is not something that is segmented to any given society, given group of your company. It's everywhere, and it's something that smart, progressive, innovative HR professionals and leaders will really be thinking about as an area to focus in on your company, for all of your constituents. And
also keep in mind that that while employees below 29 had a higher, nearly 60% kind of likelihood to feel that the workplace had stress, 30% overall is still a giant number across all of your employees. So that is an unacceptable number for many employers, to think that 30% of their employees feel that the workplace fosters a high stress environment. So those things are important. And then also add on, these are the future of your employee base. They will only get older, and so they will take up a greater part. That is going to track with them. It doesn't stay with you when you're young. It'll certainly evolve with them as they get older.
Yeah. Let's turn to some questions, Barry, and see if we can answer some things that are going on in the Q&A. I'm going to start with one. You may pick another one next. But there's a question about the difference between empathetic management and therapy. And I love this question. Thank you so much for asking it. We do not want managers to be therapists. They're not trained for it. They shouldn't be therapists. It's not their job. It introduces all sorts of mischief into the workplace conversation that really should be kept out of it. We can have a whole nother webinar on the notion of bringing your whole self to work, because honestly, nobody wants all of me, and they probably don't want all of you, Barry. They probably want not all of any of us, but in the truest sense of the word. And therapy, if we try and introduce therapeutic notions into work, we're going to get more than is valuable for the things we're trying to achieve together.
No, in fact,
I just want to say that the empathetic manager will really understand, and this is where HR can help them, really understand what are the tools and resources that the company makes available. Everybody knows there's an EAP at almost every company, but you may not know about the many other services that your health insurance provider is offering. I was just looking at ours the other day and was really surprised to see a few things. So it really helps to arm leaders with or managers with all the full tool set, so that they can help share that information, because often it's not It's not the top line information about your health insurance. Give managers tools and boundaries, help them understand where those boundaries are, and when something tips over into the a therapeutic sort of notion, what they should do about that then. It's really helping train the managers to be empathetic and draw the line at therapy for sure. Barry, I cut you off.
No, not at all. And that's exactly what our most recent research with the APA kind of illustrates. So one of the other things that we found there is that it's not in the awareness and understanding of what mental health issues are. It was in the navigation of finding and getting help. And that if there's employers should not be trying to dive in and become psychologists or in the mental health care field. That is not the point of what they're supposed to do. And that actually would exacerbate that data point where there's a fall off of people. But there are many resources out there for things. APA Center for Workplace Mental Health. There's primary care physicians. There's so much support out there that really employers shouldn't be getting into the business of starting to branch over to where they're treatment essentially.
We're almost at time. I'm going to pick a quick one because it's one of my favorite ones to answer. I have such a great story to tell about this. But the question is, what role can executives play in shaping culture and particularly as it relates to mental health? And the answer there is really simple. It is be vulnerable and transparent. When an executive tells a personal story, it opens up all sorts of permission among others in the organization to share their stories, to feel like it's not stigmatized, to feel like there's a pathway to sharing that they're struggling and that they can still be successful, productive employees. Both of those truths can be held at the same time. And so this is just a significant area for leadership and to just make sure that they are setting the tone for vulnerability and transparency within their employee base as well. All right, I think we're going to really run out of time here. We have a whole bunch of questions, and I don't know about you, Barry, but as I look at them, I think I've got a 6 months worth of blog posts that we can write out of these questions.
Great.
I hope that if you have a question that you really feel like you want to have answered, please let Barry or me know. We're our email addresses are firstname.lastname@finpartners.com. You can reach out to either one of us. We're going to be reaching out to you, thanking you for your time and attention today with a few other resources as well. So look for that in the next couple of days. We really appreciate you joining this webinar and just contributing your own thinking to the innovations that are necessary. We all have to build this together to create the workplace of the future that really works for everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.